What's up, world? This is Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. I want to welcome you back to another episode of Real Role Models in Our Community. I have the pleasure of having with me again Mr. Coy Lafferty. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Thanks, Max.
And Coy, just to recap a little bit, is one of my really big, I consider you a dear friend and a peer classmate from our graduate studies and serves with the Lebanon Police Department. Just to kind of catch everybody up on the slim and skinny of that. Um, I really appreciate you coming back with me. You know, this idea of real role models in the community is important. And I think that sometimes some of the images or archetypes that are maybe portrayed in popular media or things like that don't really get to the authentic elements of people in our community. And so I really appreciate you just really for the person that you are, but then also the fact that you get to represent kind of that community archetype of the police officer for us.
I appreciate you inviting me on here to talk to you, Max. And I've really enjoyed getting to know you. Enjoyed going through the master's program with you, and I'm looking forward to our talk.
Yeah. And so congratulations on another tour around the sun. You made it to 58, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to say happy belated birthday. Since that happened since the last time we got to speak.
Right.
What else has kind of been going on in your world since then?
Man, we just I've got a 13-year-old and 18-year-old, and we're just busy all the time. The 18-year-old's in her freshman year at Belmont, so we're moving her out of the dorms and all that stuff. And the 13-year-old, he's hating every minute of school, just like I did at the same age. So it's we I'm 58, but I'm a well-worn 58. That's why I look like 58. So yeah, but
Well, but at the same time, you're still right in the midst of it. You know what I'm saying? And maybe a real benefit for your kids to have a seasoned parent. I know that I certainly approach parenthood differently now than I did when I started this whole thing out about 17 years ago with my first child.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they get the benefit of that for sure. Um, the last time we spoke, you really made it a point to say that you identify as a Christian before anything else. And so it was important for me, you do represent this archetype in the community, this police officer for this kind of social experiment we're doing in this podcast, right?
Right.
Um, but it was important for me to right humanize you, right, to say that I know you first as this friend and a father and a member of the community. And you were like, yes, but you said first, I'm a Christian. I really wanted to take some time and unpack that a little bit. Why was it important for you to say that, and what does that mean to you?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't know if I can succinctly answer your question, but I would say that though I feel like personally I do a very poor job of representing Christ. So when I say that I'm Christian, it's what I aspire to be. And I hope maybe that somebody sees that in me, but I'm afraid that I fail in that a lot of times. So, those that see this that know me and say, "Man, I would have never got that from him," that's bad on me, because that's what I aspire to be. Um, you mentioned my age a while ago. That means that's almost that many years I've been failing in trying to you know um, mirror Christ to those around me. So as I get older, and I guess everybody kind of reevaluates what's important to them. And I think the reason that I pointed that out to you last time is, you know, since, since having kids, since getting older, since kind of learning a little bit about what life's about, the things that are important to me rearranged in order of importance. So yeah, I would say that I would always point out that I'm a Christian first. Failed Christian in most cases, But a failed Christian is trying, and I hope that through my failures, people will see that I'm trying. So I guess that's why it was important for me to point it out.
Okay.
Okay.
And so, is that something that's kind of always been prevalent in your life as a youngster? Did your folks have you in church? Did you go to Sunday school? Were you at vacation Bible school? Because I grew up in the South, and my folks were always in church, and even I found out I've learned as I've gotten older that I'm kind of maybe more churched than even other folks here in the Bible Belt. So I have a different perspective sometimes of what that stuff means. And
Yeah.
so, were you in church as a child? Was that important to your family?
Yeah, looking back, I'm very thankful that that's the case because I wouldn't have naturally gone to church. I wouldn't have naturally been drawn to church. I don't think. I mean, who knows? But yes, my mother, it was very important to her that she took me to church. So I was always being taken to church, either by my parents or my grandparents. That was very important to them. And, it says in the Bible, and I can't quote Bible verses like I should be able to, but it's something along the lines of raise up a child in the way they should go. When they grow, they won't depart from it. Well, I look at that as kind of what happened to me, Max. I didn't like going when I was younger. Every excuse I got to get out of going, I would do that. But it stuck, right? So yeah, yeah. I was very much taken to church, and that was very much a part of who my family were. And I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
otherwise, I don't know if I'd ever been drawn to it.
Sure, sure. And so, is there a particular denomination or flavor brand of Christianity you prescribe to?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you asked that. First off, let me, for my pastor's sake, say that I belong to Emmanuel Baptist Church. Now, having said that, I was not raised Baptist. In fact, my mother never wanted me to end up a Baptist or a Catholic. Those were the two Christians that she didn't agree with. So it's kind of funny that I married a Catholic and I ended up becoming Baptist. Um, so
Poor mom.
yeah, I know. No disrespect to my mother at all.
Lord have mercy, child.
Yeah, yeah. So denominational differences, and that's a whole conversation of itself, right, Max? So I would think that, for me personally, that's been a journey that I'm still on. If you asked me what my beliefs were, they probably don't fit neatly in any one denomination, if you want to talk about denomination. But also, that's kind of an evolving thing for me, too, quite frankly.
Sure, sure, and should be. So what? I understand you're a member of the Manual Baptist Church, so I know you've been submerged. To join a Baptist church, you got to be submerged.
Okay.
Which we ain't gonna get into all that. I'm a nerd and I can chase these rabbits. We're not gonna do any of that today. Your wife, you mentioned, is a Catholic. Is she a practicing Catholic? Does she go to mass kind of regularly and take communion and those different things?
So no, not regularly. She since she and I had been married, and I think it was more to just kind of not confuse the kids. When we were dating, we literally would go every other Sunday. We'd go to Emmanuel one Sunday, and we'd go to the cathedral the next. When we had kids, she didn't want to do that, which I appreciate. And the kids have been raised in Emmanuel. Now, on occasion, she goes to Catholic church, but it's kind of sporadic.
Okay, okay,
She would still consider herself a Catholic, but she's been going to Baptist church for the last 20 years or close to it.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Okay, and what about mom? What flavor did mom appreciate?
so my mother always leaned towards Pentecostal, and that's kind of where she ended up as she got older. Those were the kind of churches, real fundamental churches that she was kind of drawn to. Now she was raised Methodist. My grandmother was Methodist. But as she got older, she was drawn more into kind of a Pentecostal full gospel type
So,
church.
and we'll get into the military aspect of it more because I know sometimes, and I don't know if this was true for your life, but I know sometimes uh, when you live on or near military bases, you really just kind of go to whatever the chaplain might be or whatever might be local. But was there something when you were a child that your mother tried to keep you in particularly?
Yeah, we ended up, and you're right. When we were in different countries, when we lived in Turkey, they had two services. They had a Catholic service and a Protestant service. They had a chaplain that was Catholic and a chaplain that was Protestant. So we just went to the Protestant service. But at other places where we lived and we would go off base to a church, we ended up going to the Nazarene church a lot. So over the years, I went to the Nazarene church quite a bit, actually.
Okay, okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. That is fun, and I wonder if maybe we might could even have us another line of conversation if you would be interested in doing that in more of the theological realm. But we'll talk about that another time. Um, so your parents, and just to be clear, kind of for maybe the audience, and just so I'm clear in what I'm saying, when I say your parents, I mean your adopted parents. When
Right.
I make a distinguishment from that, I will add the biological to it. Is that fair? Is that a proper way to look at things?
Absolutely. And just as a side note, I know we probably don't have time to go down every trail, but I learned after learning of my biological parents, they were Catholic. So yeah.
That is
So
interesting. That is interesting. So you were adopted. Your parents were living in Smyrna, Tennessee, right?
that's yeah.
How long were they there in Smyrna when you were young? And then kind of where did you go from there?
So my earliest memories were of Smyrna, but I was very, very young, and I don't know how long we were there. Not long. Then we moved to Goldsboro, North Carolina. And then I can distinctly remember going to school in Goldsboro because my mother was a school teacher there. I have memories prior to Goldsboro, but they're very not very cohesive and they're kind of all over the place.
Okay,
So
and go ahead.
we probably were in Smyrna for so they adopted me when I was basically a year old, 11 months, and I started school in Goldsboro. So we were probably there, what, 4 years maybe in
Yeah.
Smyrna, something like that.
Okay, that's interesting. And I kind of got ahead of myself, but also wanted to know kind of where were your parents from? Are they from the Tennessee area, or were they from somewhere else and just got to Smyrna because of the Air Force Base? Tell me more about that background.
Sure. My father was stationed at the Air Force Base. From the East Coast. He's from a little town in Virginia called Chariton, Virginia, but it's on a peninsula um, off the coast of Virginia. My mother was a school teacher in Smyrna. She was originally from Jackson County, Tennessee, but she left Jackson County. She went to school at MTSU, got her teacher certificate, and she got a job with Smyrna High School. And she was a business teacher at Smyrna High School where she met my father, who was stationed at the air base.
That's interesting. And I bet she knows my cousin. Um, and I was going to put Carter on the last end of her name, but she's not a Carter. But she lived in Murfreesboro, and she was a teacher at Smyrna High School, and she also went through that teaching. It wasn't you. They didn't get a bachelor's degree because that program wasn't there yet, but it was a teaching certificate program that she got first, and then went on to get her finish up her undergraduate somewhere else. So there may be actually a connection there. That's kind of interesting. So your pops, was his folks from Virginia?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of family up there? Do you know anything about that?
I do have, of course, all of his generation have passed away. I think he may have one or two siblings still alive. The cousins that are on the East Coast, I met when I was a young person. I haven't seen them in over probably 40 years or 45 years. But yeah, the Laffertys are still there.
Interesting. That is interesting. And so your mom was from Jackson County, and we'll talk a little bit more about Jackson County a little bit later, which I just absolutely love that area and kind of got a little bit of a personal connection to as well. Um, so Goldsboro, North Carolina, South Carolina, what'd you say?
North Carolina. North Carolina.
Okay,
Mhm.
and that's kind of where you remember first going to school, right?
That that's correct, and that was because at that time my mother was still teaching, and she had gotten a job at Goldsboro Christian School. It was a private Christian school, and that's where I started my elementary school.
Okay, cool,
She was
cool.
she was a first grade teacher at that time.
All right, well, track me through these different places and maybe go by age or maybe go by grade of these different places that you've lived, and just so I can get a kind of a sketch
Sure.
of your grammar years.
Sure. So we lived in Goldsboro for honestly 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure how long, maybe four. Then we moved to Blytheville, Arkansas, and my father was stationed at Blytheville Air Force Base for a while. I think we only stayed there a year, and he was assigned to Karamazov, Turkey, and then we lived in Turkey another maybe year and a half or 2 years in Turkey. Then his last duty station before he retired, they sent us back to the States to Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona. And he finished up his service in Phoenix, Arizona. And when he retired, we moved back to Jackson County to my grandparents in Jackson County's place.
Okay. How old were you when you moved back to Jackson County?
I was 11 or 12. It was in 1979.
Okay, so man, that's a lot of moving in your young life.
Yes,
All
sir.
basically your grammar school, your elementary school years, you've
Yeah.
moved every 2 years. Is that
Yeah.
about right?
Yeah. Every year to 2 years. Yeah. And I ended up I went to sixth grade in Gainesboro, and then I went to seventh and eighth grade at Defeated Elementary.
Man, what was that like for a kid
Well,
moving and not really getting any settled in a school and stuff like that?
so now looking back, it was obviously different than most people's experiences, but to me, it was just my life. So I didn't know anything different. By the time I got to high school, most of my friends had known their classmates their entire life, which wasn't the case with me. Like literally, I never had a friend over a year or two, growing up. So, yeah, I don't know what did how did that mold me? I'm not sure. I don't know, Max. Unlike you that looks back, and I guess I can now because through high school I had kind of the same friends, but you got friends that you went to school with your entire life. I'm sure most people do. That was not my experience. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so I moved around very little, like you said, but I did move around a bit and have to change schools. And I understand kind of that feeling of being the new kid. And
Mhm.
is that, were you just kind of always the new kid? And were you able to make any kind of meaningful friendships in those times? I mean, I'm just trying to understand how that was for a young man.
So yeah, as far as being the new kid, when you're in the military, everybody's the new kid. People are always moving, so that's a little different. As far as meaningful friendships, meaningful at the time, not lasting, not durable. There was never a case where I ever kept up with anybody that I used to know in another state or another country. That didn't translate. But as far as the new kid, it was a little different because everybody was constantly moving.
Yeah, that's interesting too because I do another podcast that's primarily been with my father, and it's kind of a family history type vibe. And he talks about his military career, and I kind of asked him if there was any culture shock in that experience, kind of coming from Laverne, Tennessee, to these different military bases and things. And he said the biggest difference of culture wasn't necessarily the different places, but it was the civilian world versus the military world.
Right.
And every kind of in the military culture, like you said, everybody was kind of in that same situation, and so there maybe was um, maybe some support and community just in that shared experience. Would you maybe agree with that, or can you see
Yeah.
anything like that?
Yes, I would. I would definitely agree with that. For the most part, and you could ask your dad if he felt this way. There's something about being in the military, that culture, that it's people. It becomes the norm to them, and quite frankly, like I was talking about last time, I was drawn to government service, likely because of that, because it's a really it's really appealing, you know, in
Yeah,
in in a strange way. It's a different kind of lifestyle, but it's appealing if you live that way very long, it becomes something that you like, I
yeah,
guess, maybe.
yeah. Well, and I've had peers that kind of expressed to me that the structure was good for them and
Yeah,
and allowed them to succeed.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. That's interesting. Um, so tell me more about this time in Turkey. About how old were you when you were there?
So I was in fourth grade, third and fourth grade,
About
third and
nine, 10.
uh, I guess honestly, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, nine and 10.
Okay,
We were there until they closed that base down. They actually closed that base down right as we were leaving. So
that's interesting. And so, did you get to be out and kind of experience the world outside of the military base? Because I also know, kind of from my conversations with my father, that something that's very important to the military is to be self sufficient. So I know that you can live on a military base and there's nothing that you everything you need is there. The PX and the
yeah,
commissary and the everything is really there, and you can almost have maybe a somewhat American, more American lifestyle than is in the rest of the country. Were you able to get out off a base and experience that any?
it's absolutely true what he said. You're in a kind of a bubble. You're kind of an American bubble. But yes, I actually, and it was kind of nice. My father befriended a bus driver, so on the base they had a basically shuttle bus because nobody had their cars over there. Everybody left their car in the states because it costs quite a bit. There was no reason to have one, so the base runs shuttle buses all the time. And my father became good friends with a shuttle bus driver, and he had some kids that were roughly my age, and I actually befriended them, and I actually got to visit their house on a number of occasions. I spent the night with them, just like kids do.
Yeah,
Uh, we played together. Of course, they didn't speak English and I didn't speak Turkish, so that was kind of a challenge. But the universal challenge of playing and all that stuff, we had a good time, and so yes, I was able to get off the base and experience, just a small fraction of that. But yeah, it was a really it, it was. I'm glad I got to do that. It was very fulfilling, and I learned a lot from that. I actually got to see them get circumcised. They invited me to their circumcision, and I got to see the three boys get circumcised. Which was a cultural event that most people will never get to see. To see the Muslim circumcision ceremony. So that was kind of, I'm quite honored that that they thought enough of me to invite me to do that.
yeah.
So,
So, what are some of maybe the things? And I might ask you about things that you might not remember or might not even thought about. But in going to these people's homes, what was the landscape like? and what maybe was the architecture of the communities and the infrastructure like? Do you remember anything like that? And can you kind of talk to me about that?
Yeah, so Turkey at the time, now I wouldn't speak to now, but Turkey in the mid 70s looked like the United States in the 20s, maybe. So now what I mean by that is um, on your main streets, there would be just as many horse and buggies as there would be cars. And there would be livestock, and there would be, people driving their livestock from one town to the next. And, the infrastructure was, there was a lot of cobblestone roads. There were some paved roads, but there were a lot of dirt roads and gravel roads, much like we had here in this country several years ago. Um, like our friend that I was telling you about, his house was half barn and half house. So like the lower levels were a barn, and he lived upstairs basically. So it was like an apartment above a barn, and that was kind of the whole village was. So the village typically they might have one cow or two cows that they milked, and maybe a couple sheep, and they literally put them under their house at night, and then during the day they drove them down the road to, they had fields that were kind of surrounding these villages that had maybe like cherry trees and peach trees and orchards and that sort of thing, where they would go and work. And then beside all those they would like take a block or something, and they would tie their cow out, and the cow would like graze during the day, and then they would drive them back home at night. So I can still remember all that.
Yeah,
I can remember that. um, their house, of course, didn't have an air conditioner or heat or any of that sort of thing. They had, they heated with wood. But I can remember in the side, or what we'd say their yard, I guess, they had a big like earthen oven where, they baked and cooked and they made their bread and that sort of thing. So, I can't imagine that it's still like that today, but I would say that technology wise, that they were a good 50, 60 years behind the United States at the time.
yeah.
Um, the automobiles that they did have were really old American automobiles, you know. So
And what was the landscape like? Do you recall? Like, was it arid? Were you in a mountainous region? Do you
it was,
remember anything like that?
yeah. So we were on the coast. We were on the sea. We lived in the. If you look at Turkey on the map, we lived at the northernmost, easternmost part. So, like, if you know where Istanbul is, Istanbul splits Europe and Asia. We were probably 30 minutes outside of Istanbul on the coast. So I think that's the Marmara Sea, and we lived right on the Marmara Sea. So
Wow.
it was kind of on the edge of a mountainous region, but where we were like, and I was 5 minutes walking to the Marmara Sea. I could put my toes in it. So
Yeah. So you were y'all more of in a gulf, or kind of the part that's descending down into the sea from from maybe some the ranges? Is that? I'd have
I
to look
don't.
at it. I'd have to look at a map more closely to maybe be able to direct that question a little bit
You
more.
look, if you get a chance, if you're looking at the map of Turkey and you find Istanbul, like we're literally like 30 minutes car drive from Istanbul. So that's in the furthest northernmost
Okay.
northeast. Yeah.
Okay. I'll check that out for sure. Um, Man, that is really interesting stuff. So, what was in talking about the landscape? What did the flora look like? Meaning, what was the plant life? What kind of grasses did they have? Was it? Can you describe that for me?
You know what? I can't remember that much about that, except Max, that there were a lot of, and this might be some kind of indication as to what the weather was, but there are a lot of peach and cherry and citrus orchards as well, lemons and oranges and that sort of thing. So I would imagine, it's just me guessing right here, but I know that around the Mediterranean, there's a lot of that kind of stuff grows, and so we're not that far off of the Mediterranean either. So I would think it's a similar climate.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's cool. And so you mentioned that the friends of the family, they were of the Muslim tradition.
Sure.
But there was no issue in that with your folks. Was that ever talked about? Were you prepped? Did your family ever like prep you as far as like, hey, this is different?
Yeah.
Um,
So the I specifically wasn't prepped, but I can remember briefings that the families went to when we got there. You know, they had different briefings, and there were certain things that they told us not to do. They told us not to try to proselytize. You know, they said that that's not, you know, don't do that. They said don't try to give out Bibles. At the time, American blue jeans. That was another thing they told us. Don't give any blue jeans. You know, those kind of type things. I guess there was a big black market for American Western goods, and so the American authorities told us, you know, not to get involved in that sort of thing.
mhm.
And they said that there were factions. I can remember that they had drills like, you know, anti-invasion drills on the base and that sort of things. And this would have been right before the Iranian Revolution. This would have been prior to that. So
Right.
there probably was some feelings of anti-Americanism, whatever, but it wasn't overtly like it is now. I understand now it's very overt, but at the time, no, that we were their ally and they treated us like that. They were very kind to us, very very kind to us. There was no feeling of, you know, being hated for being an American or anything like that. Not very hospitable. I I I have nothing bad about to say about the way we were treated. We were treated wonderful. You know that.
Well, and so you said that the American authorities made it a point to tell y'all that not to be proselytizing. Was there any of that coming the other way, or was there any like talk? Not maybe not proselytizing, but just kind of saying like when you're getting ready to go to this circumcision ceremony, was that kind of explained to you? Not like as a time to try to recruit you, but to make you aware of what's going on or anything like that?
No, of course, um, the man's family, and he only spoke about 3 words English. The kids didn't speak any. The wife didn't speak any. The daughter didn't speak any. The mom or whoever that was doing the sermon, everything was in Turkish, so I had no clue. I didn't even
Yeah,
know. I didn't even know what I was going to until I saw what I saw, and then I was traumatized probably for life.
yeah.
Yeah. So my mother had to explain all that to me, and then of
Were
course
your folks with you on that experience, or you were with the family and this happened and you were like,
it was
guess
planned.
what I saw?
It was planned. They asked my parents if I could go to it, and they
Okay.
agreed to it. So they knew what I was getting into, but I didn't know. And
Yeah.
it was a big ceremony. They dressed them up in military uniforms. They had a feast. You know, they invited a bunch of people over. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
Um, but I couldn't understand anything going on. And in my experience, and it may be different. It may be different now, but um, there was never any there was never any attempt to convert anybody to it was merely them being kind and letting me witness something that I otherwise wouldn't get to witness, you know.
It's a
And
pretty big honor when you think about it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially because I was the same age as the boys, you
Right.
know.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was. Looking back now, I realize how big of an honor it was, and I definitely appreciate it. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So that's very interesting to me because it's the common humanity of it,
yeah,
right? All these differences that are created really by, we'll just say, people in power, so to speak. Um, but the people are always just people, right? There's not a person that I know that wants to fight an Iranian.
right, right.
I know some Iranian folks. They don't know none of their family that
Yeah,
wants to fight an American.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
It's not the people. It's the people that fight the wars,
Right.
but it's not their interest
Yeah. No,
to be fighting the war.
that's right. That's right. Now, like I said, when I speak of this, if anybody's listening to this that has more contemporary information about what's going on over there, let me say this was the mid '70s. The world was a different place then. But no, I enjoyed it, and I got a lot of education out of it. I'm glad I got to do that.
Yeah, and well, and just to say, I would always welcome more information, but I don't think that. Also, you were a child,
Right.
but everything that you have stated doesn't express anything that comments on history or what you are expressing is human dignity and the
Sure.
human experience, and that
Right.
transcends. That's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
All right. So before I get all cheesy and a little tear comes out of my left eye, it's always the left eye. Um, but anyways, you said after y'all kind of came back from Turkey, and that's just really a huge experience. I feel like I'm probably going to want to go back and visit some more after I review our talk today. Did I hear you say after Turkey y'all came back and went to Phoenix for a little while, or was there somewhere in between that?
No, we went back to Phoenix, and Phoenix was the last place that we were stationed.
What do you remember? So how long were you there? First off, and kind of what do you remember about Phoenix?
We were in Phoenix for 1 year. That's how much my father needed to finish up his pension. And I remember quite a bit about Phoenix because that was where I was the oldest before we retired. In fact, he had considered buying a house and us retiring there. And we would have, except that the timing was such that my grandfather passed away, leaving my grandmother by herself. So we ended up moving back to help her.
Oh, that's very interesting. And I've been out to Phoenix. I've hung out in Arizona a little bit. I hadn't hung out around Phoenix as much. I always kind of come into Phoenix and then kind of go to Flagstaff and do the canyon and some other places as well. Um, Funny enough, I kind of come into Phoenix and then end up like in the Sedona area of California, which all that place is beautiful, and I kind of
Right.
have a little knowledge of that area. What do you remember about that area? Were you able to experience the landscape any?
Yeah, so we lived in Glendale, which is kind of a suburb of Phoenix. And I remember, Phoenix to me is a beautiful area. Now, not as pretty as Flagstaff. I think Flagstaff is just outstanding. I really liked Arizona. It's hot. I mean, Arizona and Nevada are not places you want to break down in the summer. That's for sure. But I really like.
Flagstaff's not as bad.
No, no, that's right. Uh, but I really liked it, Max. In fact, I still like Arizona. I can't really say anything bad about Arizona whatsoever. I like the people there are awesome. There's a lot of retirees there, so it's kind of a slower pace. But yeah, no, we enjoyed it. We liked it a lot.
Good. And were you able to get out and see all those things? Did you make it to the Grand Canyon and the Painted Desert and the Petrified Forest and all that just beautiful, beautiful stuff?
Yeah, we went through the Petrified Forest on the way back through. We stopped at several places in New Mexico. We went to the Grand Canyon and the Petrified Forest and the Painted Desert and all that stuff. I had
Monument Valley.
I didn't go to Monument Valley. I had some friends that where I went to school. Their daughter, my classmate, they were missionaries to an Indian reservation, and so we got to see a lot of the Native American stuff, and which I really, really, really like. So yeah, I enjoyed that. It's Arizona's nice, man.
Yes.
Arizona's awesome. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm glad you kind of mentioned the Native American reservation. What my pops like to do, we flew into Phoenix and we rented a van and we just drove around, you
Mhm.
know, and my pops liked to do kind of the touristy stuff, but he also thought it was important for us kind of uh, get out and see regular folks, right? And so we would stop in places like Mexican Hat, Utah, and stay in a little motel because it had a bar attached to it that we could get a hamburger at and get some sleep before we went on the next day. and I just remember in some of these different places, we were kids, so we would go play ball. I remember playing basketball with these kids in the area. And what I came to learn is there's a real blurred line of what is Native American, what is Mexican, what is American, and sometimes and those things kind of sometimes blend and sometimes are very separate. And somebody will tell you, well, I'm not this, I'm that, and things like that. And it was just a really interesting experience for me when I kind of went through there. Did you experience anything like that?
Not that I can remember. It's funny you mentioned that because you corrected me maybe without meaning to correct me, and you were correct to do so. But I said Indian reservation, you said Native American reservation, and then I went on to say earlier that I said Native American artifact. So, but I say that kind of on purpose. Um, I think that what you're asking me about, as far as people are people, right? Regardless, and I think maybe sometimes we unknowingly, just like I did, right? Um, we point out differences rather than celebrating what's alike, right? And the good thing about being a kid, and goes directly to the meat of your question, the good thing about being a kid is you can kind of be oblivious to all that, right? And just be kids. You know,
Yeah, right.
if
Yes.
if you're kids and you're playing ball or whatever, you're not really concerned about, hey, where did your parents come from? How did you
Yeah.
get here?
Yeah.
And so um, I like to make excuses for myself, and by saying the reason I have so many slips like that is because honestly, I don't really think a lot about things like that,
Yeah.
and maybe I should more. But I really celebrate the fact that people are just people, and my lazy way of speaking sometimes, instead of looking at it as kind of maybe being you know politically incorrect, it's just I don't like to draw those differences,
Yeah. Yeah.
constantly. So yeah, no, I didn't notice it. I went to school with a lot of Native Americans or people with Native American backgrounds. I'm talking about in Arizona,
Yeah.
as well as Hispanics. And being
Yes.
in the military, and another thing your dad will tell you, if you don't already know, the thing about being in the military is the ultimate melting pot. And you really, this is cliche to say this, but you don't see colors and you don't see all that because everybody's the same.
Yeah.
You live in the same
Yeah.
you live in the same neighborhood, you go to the same school, you got the same house, everything's exactly the same. You know, there's no the differences are more when you get outside of that bubble, I guess is what I'm
Yeah.
trying to.
Sure. Sure. Well, and that's what you said hit the nail on the head, and that's really what I think I would want to be expressed in anything that I do. That we are all one people, and
Yeah,
and that idea of humanity and that human dignity. But I just know, like when I went down there, like the whole idea, and even some of my time in Texas too, kind of contributes to this perspective of mine. But the whole idea of I didn't cross the border crossed me, has a whole lot. I got a whole lot more understanding of that after I visited those places,
right,
if that makes sense.
right.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
um, anyways, that's good stuff, and there's more stuff I'd kind of want to explore, but I want to move on just a little bit. So your pops kind of ended his military career, and because of these family situations, your grandfather died. Y'all basically came home to your maternal home, your mother's home
That's
of
right.
Jackson County to take care of grandma and settle into life a little bit, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And you're about middle school when that happens, is that right?
Sixth grade. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And so Jackson County is Gainesboro and Granville, Tennessee, and maybe there's some smaller communities in there. Granville's very small, but those are kind of, is Gainesboro the county seat?
Yes.
Yeah, I assume so. Um, and so I, like many people whose family roots kind of start in Middle Tennessee. They, obviously weren't no white folks in Middle Tennessee, but my folks came across the Cumberland Plateau and then kind of in through Jackson and Smith County down the basin into what we call Middle Tennessee, right? So there in Granville, there's a little heritage museum or something along those lines, and
Yeah.
there are just Carters all through that Joker. You know what I
Really?
mean?
Yeah.
And we can't be kin to them all. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
If you go
Uh,
back far enough, you probably are.
but go back far enough, yeah. But there's a couple of different sets that first came across the Cumberland Gap and then over the plateau. There's the famous Carter family group, and then but you just can't be kin to them all. You know what I mean? Even if some folks might want to claim everybody. But I've got some personal connections to that area, and it is an absolutely beautiful area. And some of my favorite fishing spots are up in Jackson County. Um, where did y'all live at in Jackson County?
So, um, the easiest way I can tell you, it's we're from an area called Funds Branch, Reese Hollow. If you come through, do you know where Defeated is, right?
Yeah,
So if you go through Defeated, like you're going towards Gainesboro, if you know that way, you come through a little town called Kempville. If you keep going, you come into what they call Highland, and there's a little store there in Highland. We live way back in a dirt road, kind of in that area there, kind of on the, I guess it would be on the extreme east side, maybe of, no, excuse me, on the extreme west side of Jackson County, east side of
yeah.
Smith, just right on the line.
Back
Um,
in the woods.
very much back in the woods, very, very much back in the woods. Probably it's tar and chip now, but probably we were probably 10 miles on a dirt road.
Well, that's a big difference from
Very much.
Phoenix, Arizona, and
Yeah.
the Turkish military base.
Yeah. Very,
Uh,
very, yeah.
was that a
Big.
culture shock for you?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it very much was. It was for all of us. Yeah.
And, the sixth grade, 12, 13, I mean, that is a really important developmental time. That's why in our education program, we have kind of set aside the middle school years. Um, Try to articulate that experience for me a little bit as far as coming back. You've kind of got a idea of yourself maybe a little bit from coming through these elementary years and going through all these different places and knowing how to be the new kid and all this different stuff gives you this world perspective, and then you're in a dirt road back in a holler.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Wow. Yeah. So you described it correctly when you said it was a culture shock. It was different. I can remember I had to catch so don't make fun of me, but I rode the short bus to school, right? So I had to catch a short bus, and I rode the short bus for 45 minutes to get to the big bus. And then I rode the big bus for another 30 minutes to get to school. So, I had an hour and a half, you know, commuter right at every day, because the big bus couldn't get back to where we live.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it was different than what I was used to. There's no question about that.
So y'all come, did I hear you say you came to live at your maternal grandparents' home, or did?
Yes, we didn't live in her home. We actually lived across the street from her. So my parents bulldozed a little area across the street from her. She was on well water, so we tapped into the well, and we just put a single wide trailer across the road from her, and we lived
Okay.
there for until my parents got divorced. Essentially, yeah,
Is this on some family land or family
yeah.
farm, or did that probably have to be purchased?
It was on my grandfather's farm. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, you know, I kind of had some more I wanted to talk about today, but we've explored a lot, and you've really given me a lot of insight that I'd like to kind of take some time and kind of digest our conversation and maybe think more about where we want to go next. With I want to continue what I maybe might call a biographical sketch of your life, sir, if you don't mind. And I really appreciate these different insights. And I really want to talk more about kind of that transition from the military life to civilian life.
Right.
Um, so if you're all right, I'd like to just kind of end here and let
Sure.
us pick up another time.
Sounds great, man.
Hey, thank you so much once again, bro. And I really look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Max.
Yes, sir. All right,
Yes, sir.
this has been Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. Peace and love.